Hey everybody, Tony D and Little Joan here with another hot take, and this one is about what else? Idiots who protest in the middle of the highway. Antifa highwaymen, I guess you could call them. So the Antifa morons, the Antifa BLM idiots, I should call them, decided to stage a protest at night in Seattle on the highway. And as usual, they took ridiculous safety precautions. They decided to put two cars to block the highway, didn't put their lights on, then stood behind those cars. So, you know, you'd be driving down the highway and you would see two cars across the road. And they didn't quite block the highway so you could get around them, so you'd turn around them, and then on the other side of the cars, well, there's a line of protesters. And guess what happened? I watched the video. Two women got run over. Not run over, but they got hit by the car and they go flying. It's pretty crazy. Tim Pool's reporting on this, and I just thought I'd jump in. But this is the downside of the Antifa protesters, in that they don't have a plan. They keep staging these protests and people get hurt because they don't know what they're doing. They don't have really a smart objective. I mean, their objective is to tear down the state. So, how's this going to tear down the state? I don't quite know, but everything can be lumped in tearing down the state as long as you're causing mayhem and pain. Contrast that to peace protesters back during the Vietnam era. They wanted to stop the war. The end. I mean, yeah, there were communists and Marxists and socialists amongst the ranks who wanted to do other crazy stuff too, not unlike Antifa, but most of them primarily wanted to stop the war because they knew people who were dying. They were of draft age. They didn't want to be drafted and go to Vietnam. So there was a goal that people could see, and it was obtainable, and it was something that generally people wanted. Even people who supported the war, they didn't want war. They felt they had to have the war. So, Antifa doesn't have an objective that anybody but them kind of sort of wants. And they're so delusional, thinking that, well, once we tear down the state, then we'll take it over and it'll be great. No. If they managed to tear down the state, the next thing that would come would be total anarchy with people who have real guns and can really fight. So these noodle-armed college students aren't going to be taken over. Most of them don't have guns. Most of them don't have training. And most of them have terrible strategy, like parking two cars on the highway and then standing behind it in order to protest. The whole point of protesting is to be seen, not to stand in the dark highway and get run over. They probably thought people could see them because there were lights on that part of the highway, but, it's nighttime and you're driving down the highway 60, 70 miles an hour. It's also a bad place to protest because it was the middle of the night and the highway was mostly closed anyway. I guess they tried to close the highway in order to have their protest. But, the highway's a dumb place to have a protest unless it's busy and it's the middle of the day and you've stopped the traffic. Like, if you did a protest in LA across the highway in the middle of the day when the traffic was already stopped and then you further stopped it, well, you would be seen, right? I mean, there'd be thousands of people there and they'd be mad and you'd be causing all sorts of problems. In Seattle, the highway was empty. And then this car comes zooming by thinking the highway's clear, I guess. And, he ends up hitting two people. He also took off, which you kind of can't blame him because, the Antifa guys probably would have tore him out of the car and ripped him to pieces. So who wants that? F that. You take a chance with the jury to explain that you're afraid. And, these days, anybody who has feelings seems to get preferential treatment. So I felt I was in danger, man. Um, so I think there's probably a good chance this driver won't suffer too much consequences. Unless they can prove he did it on purpose, which I doubt. Doesn't look like something that was planned. If you were going to run into some protesters, there's a lot better, quote unquote, ways to do it, where you could get more of them if that was your objective. This was, I don't see how these Antifa people thought this was a good idea, but they're idiots. I mean, they've just got terrible strategy, except, they have good tactics that they've borrowed or that they've been taught by the radicals. And that's about it. That's all they have. So as people get clued in on their tactics, you're going to have less and less problems with these people because they're going to be countered. In the moment they start, a thing on the highway, they'll just arrest people. They'll just pass laws saying you can't block a highway, protest or not, right? I mean, it's a safety issue, in part. Or they'll pass the opposite law, like, well, if you get run over on the highway while you're protesting, that's your problem. So, I hate to be callous, but really, if you're going to cause all these problems, you have to take responsibility for causing them. People who protest generally in a peaceful way, they expect to get arrested, and they expect to be inconvenienced and go to jail, and they get booked, and usually they get let go because they're peaceful protesters. So that's expected. If you're going to stand in the middle of a highway, you have to expect that you're running the risk of getting run over. It's as simple as that, especially if you're violent lunatics that throw rocks at cars and pull people out of cars and shoot into cars. I mean, now the violence is ticking up. And this idea that Antifa, well, we were just innocently, peacefully protesting. I mean, nobody buys that. Nobody buys that anymore. There's been too many incidents. That's the problem with these guys. They think they can push this narrative, and to some extent the media will push it for them. They'll help them as best they can because they're a bunch of Marxists too. But the credibility of the media is shot, and this is one of the reasons. They just outright lie to people. I mean, when you're standing on CNN and there's a burning building in the background and a total riot, and you're saying, well, it's mostly peaceful here, it just doesn't lend any credibility. I mean, there's got to be some people who watch that and go, okay, that's it. I'm done with CNN. This is ridiculous. You just, and certainly people in places like Minneapolis, Seattle, and Portland, they got to be thinking twice before they'll ever watch CNN or MSNBC again. Because look at the coverage. When you're there and it happens to you, look at what happened to the mayor of Seattle, right? Oh, it's a summer of love. It's a block party. Oh, they came to her house twice, by the way. Now it's like, F these people. That's what always happens, And you shouldn't apologize to them in any way. You should not apologize to them to any way. And in fact, one of the things I started doing on my Twitter feed is you have these people who say stuff like, well, if you do X, Y, and Z, if you believe X, Y, and Z, please unfollow me. That kind of thing. That kind of like crazy, do this because, I believe things and you don't believe them, so F you. I do unfollow those people, and I tell them, just for the record, I'm unfollowing you because I don't like to be told what to do. Who wants to be told what to do by some rando on Twitter? You don't want followers? Okay, good. Screw you then. I won't follow you. I'm happy to tell you, too. And you shouldn't follow those people. They're idiots. But then again, Twitter is a hellscape, and it's full of Antifa idiots who post things, and and there's other people who are just, there's no other word to describe them, but they're soft. They're very soft people. Something bad happens to them, they're right on Twitter telling you about it, and it's just like, I just want to say to some of these people, not all of them, because some of them have actual problems. Those people, I think, should contact a family member or friend or a psychiatrist. But the people who are just whining about stuff, and they're genuinely whining, they're just not making flip comments. I just want to tell them, get off of Twitter. Get off of Twitter or toughen up. Just toughen up a little. It's just sad. It's sad to see some of these people and what they post. Some of them are trying to be funny, but as we all know, comedy's illegal now.